Momentum. We'd all like to create it for ourselves and for our teams. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Today we're talking about momentum, creating momentum through clarity and much more in this very special episode. What follows is my conversation with Lori Michele Leavitt, who I will introduce momentarily as a part of our virtual LeaderCon event. You can learn more about that 4-day event and how you can get access to all of my conversations there at virtualleadercon.com. But now, on with my conversation about momentum. I have with me as our guest, and you already know this, although it just down there says LML, I have Lori Michele Leavitt with us. She is the author of this wonderful book. You see my little tabs again. We'll get to that in a second. Let me introduce Lori, and then we're going to dive in. And everyone say hello to Lori in the chat, if you will. Get your fingers working. Lori Michele Leavitt, the Pivot Catalyst, has coached, consulted, and trained hundreds of leaders around the world to achieve their objectives and generate extraordinary momentum. She speaks globally on catalyzing momentum, leading, pivoting, and workplace culture change. She's also the founder and president of Abrige Corporation.
Abrige, yes.
Abrige Corporation. Her books are part of the Orchestrating Extraordinary Momentum, the Pivot series. She and her books guide leaders in generating a ripple of positive influence through their organizations to strengthen alignment and catalyze momentum. Today, we're talking about her book, Pivot to Clarity. Here it is, everybody. Pivot to Clarity. Get clear for you, be clear for others. So there we are. Lori, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
I am pleased to be here.
And so we're going to talk about this word. Well, we're going to talk about the book. But before I do any of that, I'm going to ask you this question. What's the big idea that you want to share or that you want us to get in the next 40 minutes?
Well, a couple things. One is a pivot. The whole scope of a pivot is not quick. So everything we hear in the news, the media, from others, is that a pivot is choo, choo, choo. Well, you know what? The decision to pivot is quick. The awareness of needing to pivot is not quick. The orchestration of going through and orchestrating your pivot is not quick, so do not give up too soon. And a key to being able to orchestrate that pivot and not giving up too soon is clarity.
When I have to tell all of you in the background here. So first of all, to Michael's point, I will do a better job. The feedback I got was hold the book up longer. So I'm going to try to remember to do that. The other thing is to know that there will be resources that you'll be able to access later that will give you where all the stuff, including the links to the book. So you don't have to do the screen capture if you don't want to, and all of that. But I hear the feedback and will do my best. Okay. So now what I want to say is that when I got this book, and I don't remember if Lori or her team asked us if we wanted a copy or she just sent it. I don't remember. Sometimes both happen. I don't remember. But what I do know is that as soon as I saw the title, that I was interested, right? Because I love both of those words, pivot and clarity. And there you go. The team is saying where you can find all the resources. So you can always go to virtualleadercon.com/resources and it will be updated. So all of that would be there. That's awesome. Thank you, Adrian. But Lori, I love the title right from the start and I love the book. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with a quote from the book. Okay. And let you comment on that, because before we can get to clarity, there's something that you say on page 26 that I absolutely love. So I'm going to read it to everybody, and then I'm going to have you comment however you want. If you are consumed by the need to stay busy, you might even find interruptions welcome. If you are going for performance breakthrough, which is why we're all here, by the way, everybody. If you're going for performance breakthrough, which requires clarity, you need to practice gaining clarity. Clarity practice for leaders involves time for thought, deep thought. What do you want to add?
Yeah, it still gives me chills because it is so, so true. We need to give ourselves the time to step away. And I'm not talking about 10 minutes between the meetings, although sometimes that works as a recovery if your emotions are high and you need to step back and come back. But in order to truly set a direction for yourself, to be pulled by that purpose, you need to pause. You need to pause. And we can talk about pausing if you'd like. It's not, I don't talk about it a lot in the book, but I've thought about it a lot since. And I did post a YouTube video on the topic of just how people do take that step away. What do you do?
So we have to be willing to pause. We have to be okay with doing nothing. I wrote about that recently. It's okay. Nothing isn't can be quite something actually. So I felt when I read it, I just wanted to share that today. And Brian says almost like stopping to breathe, which I would agree with.
Mhm.
So you've said the word clarity. I've said the word clarity. So since you wrote the book, what does that actually mean? Let's get clear about clarity. What does it
Yes.
mean?
In fact, it wasn't so easy to write the book. I started writing it before the pandemic, and then we entered the pandemic, and none of us were very clear, right? I mean, our minds were a bit fuzzy. And here I am writing a book about clarity. And really, I mean, my gifts are a gift. And so I want the reader to feel something. It's not just instructional that can just be thrown out of myself and written down, well, do this, do this, do this. It really, you're not going to get clear unless you feel um, the inside and that empowerment to be clear. So, clarity is in two parts, and you really do need to think about them separately. One is getting clear because you, as a leader, even as a leader of your life, you are not going to have a direction, meaning you're going to be all over the place, unless you take time to get clear about where you want to go. And if you're leading a team, unless you take the time to get inspired yourself, get to that point where you are like, yes, then you are not going to be inspiring with others. And then the second part is being clearer because now you've taken all this time and you feel yes and you feel excited. And then you express your message and it doesn't land. So you need to understand, what do you need to do? What do you need to see and be aware of in order so for your communication to land?
Which goes back, and of course you weren't here, Lori, this morning, but one of the things I talked to the group about early this morning is that thoughts are fuzzy and words bring clarity. So even if we've thought about getting clear, until we put words to it, it's whether that's writing them or saying them to our dog or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like putting words to it matters a lot. So I think it's very common that even if people have gotten clear, they're not very good at making it clear, being clear to others, or communicating that effectively because too much of it's still in their head. And what's in our head might be clear, but when it comes out of our mouth, it's Swiss cheese, right?
Right. And imagine then what happens if you haven't gotten clear first, right? Which so
Well,
many of
which
us
is what
do,
happens most of the time,
right?
right?
We're moving so fast, and then we expect everyone else to get it when we we don't even get it. So what are we thinking? The other part of this and why I say separate the two is because the getting clear part in order to set the direction is still a little fuzzy. Allow yourself to be in awe, to think so far out that you have no idea how you're going to get there. Allow yourself to do that and allow yourself to lead so that you aren't figuring out so that you know it all and could tell everybody else what to do. You're actually getting to this point where you can set the direction. This is where you're going. And then you have the courage, the wherewithal, the leadership qualities to allow others to step up and say, okay, if we're going here, then this is what I am going to do next.
So I love that, first of all. And I'm going to say to everybody I'm going to call it capital C clarity, like clarity on the big picture, clarity on the direction, clarity on the outcomes, clarity on the purpose. Like all that is so important, of course. But I want all of you to think about this whole conversation, not just about the capital C clarity, but about the little c clarities too. Like one of the things that I have said 1,000 times or worked with leaders 1,000 times on is, people say, leaders will say, well, they're just not doing it. I'm like, well, do they know what it is? Well, I said, well, I don't, and neither do they. Like, let's just start everything that Lori's saying, we could be saying about purpose and meaning and direction and overcoming uncertainty and all those things. It can also be said about setting clear expectations, because so often as leaders, don't have clear expectations. And how can someone meet them if we don't even know what they are, right? So
Mm-hmm.
please think about this: capital C and little c. That's my language. Lori, you want to add to that? Agree, disagree,
Yeah.
anything there?
No, it's so true. And especially if we've been leading the team for a while, or just think about your relationships. How many times do we think that they really know us well? And so, why would they think we meant that when we said that? How on earth? But they think, how on earth could they be upset or confused because they know us, right? And
And
unfortunately,
yes, and exactly.
and unfortunately, there are so many things that happen that don't allow your message to land. So it is on you. If you want your communication to land, then you need to take the time to find the right words, find the right order for the words. Again, it's not perfection. You're staying open as well to have to repeat yourself, or that they might not get it the first time, and to have emotional intelligence so your emotions don't go up.
So Matt asked the question that everyone's thinking. Okay. What are some of the tools or tactics that you have used to gain clarity? So your mind is moving 100 miles an hour. How do you slow down and to get the clarity around those ideas? So give us some
Thanks
couple of
for
hows.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. And I mentioned that I had taken some time to now think of, well, how do they go into deep thought? Because I really hadn't explored I gave some examples. So it really does help with what deep thought means and getting away and how you find time. But then I thought, and I didn't include this in the book. I have a YouTube video out. I think I put it somewhere else. I can't remember. But about pause. What is a pause, and how do you pause? So I came up with three, the power of three things to do when you're pausing to get clear and when you're pausing to be clear. So let's start with the getting clear, because what Brian asked was, how do I pause? And first, it is to now this is pausing to get clear, right? It's not pausing to remove the emotions, leave the meeting for a second. I'm talking about pausing when you're getting clear. So I go places, like I go to Cabo a lot, and go somewhere where you can think, but I also go for walks, whatever works for you, where you can be. So step 1 is allow yourself to be in awe. And why I chose the word awe is because it's not curiosity. Curiosity, even though it is open and you're thinking of questions, it also, we're so used to doing it. We go into discovery mode and we're trying to figure it all out. And remember, when we're getting clears, we're not in the state of trying to figure it all out. So allow yourself to be in that open ended awe that, oh, wow, that would be phenomenal. So that's step 1. Step 2 is interruption. Because what happens to all of us, it happens to me as well. I am not perfect, is that our minds will go, how on earth could you do that? Or, yeah, that's great, but if I take this to the leadership team, they're going to think I'm crazy. No one's going to agree. Blah, blah, blah. That's what happens in our
Shut
heads.
off that. We got those two voices. Shut that one off is what you're saying, right?
So, one, be kind to yourself. It will happen. So you're not going to rewire your brain such that you don't have those thoughts. To learn that trigger is going to allow in you to say, isn't that interesting? And it may be a warning sight, but you're in a stage of awe. So just say, isn't that interesting? Put it aside and stay in awe. And then the last is recovery. So we mess with our minds more by, for example, going to bed and trying to figure it out, or thinking about what's going to go wrong, or what we don't want to have happen tomorrow, or whatever that is. And what I'm asking of you and all of you, yes, be grateful. Yes, do those practices. But when we're talking about getting clear, try to get back into that state of awe before you rest, and be in that recovery, and allow your wonderful mind to do the magic for you.
See, look what Matt Matt gave you an acronym: awe, interruption, recovery. Clear the air and gain clarity. Okay, so Matt asked the question. So I'm going to give us a thumbs up, Matt, if you're happy with the answer. I think you are. So it's interesting that you say that. So I'm gonna go where I'm gonna guess someone is. There you go, Matt. Thank you. I'm gonna go where I'm guessing somebody went. Because when I'm sitting in this chair, I'm always trying to think about what might others be thinking, right? And so you said pause, and so I'm going to go to Cabo, and somebody's like, I can't go to Cabo. And so
And by the way, I don't go to Cabo San Lucas. I go to San Luis del Cabo, the quiet place, and I actually
okay,
go to
well,
a place
okay,
in
that's fair.
between the two
Where I
where
was
it's
headed
super
was,
quiet.
and that makes sense. But where I was headed was, and I'm all with you that our environment matters in this a lot. Like, and so there's nothing wrong with going anywhere necessarily. But some people are saying, okay, that's awesome. I don't have enough PTO to do that in the next 3 months, or I don't, whatever, right? Like, or my kids are in school. What are you talking about? So what can we do sooner? Or what can we do until we can get to that perfect environment?
Oh, I write books when I go that place. I go through awe and letting my mind wander just from a walk around a park that I live nearby. So whatever does it for you, it can be a bike ride, a run, park. I mean, nature helps the process. That's why I mentioned those things.
Perfect.
If you prefer to just sit and look out a window or something, do that.
I just didn't want anyone to lose the idea by getting blocked at the start. That's all. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. I agree with
Mhm.
you. I think that's exactly right. So uh, in the introduction, I talked about another word that you use a lot other than pivot, and that is momentum. So how does clarity relate to pivot and momentum?
Yeah,
What's the
momentum is
connection that
one of
we
my
need to make?
favorite words. You might call it flow, whatever, but when you're not stalled, when you're staying nimble, when you have those things that cut you off at the knees and you recover quickly and you just keep moving forward, in even if it's little steps, you feel, even if you're not getting the financial reward you're expecting, you can feel it. You can feel it when you're doing the right things that are moving you toward that direction you're headed. That is momentum. And what I do is I help leaders orchestrate that momentum within their organization. I help leaders orchestrate that in their lives. And it is setting the stage. It is learning learning the pause, learning how to get clear, learning how to communicate clearly, learning to let go and let others take over. And all of that will help keep you in a state of momentum.
Okay, so now you're pointing to the other half of the equation that we started with, which was getting clarity and then being clear. And we talked earlier about being clear in terms of communicating it to others, but it's
Yes.
also about staying clear for us. And this is how this is probably connected to the idea here of momentum or flow. So talk more about that piece of this.
So I think one of the big things, and this is one of the chapters I give away in a download on my sites, is chapter 7 on hope and fear. So I've talked about getting into, moving into awe, and and that, if you're communicating awe with others or something that you find really inspiring, that can inspire others and create hope. So hope is an opener. And I just want to leave it at that that's all it is. It's a hope is an opener. It's not going to get the next step. It's just opens up the minds. The next steps, you need to understand fears in you and fears in others, because those are the huge stall points. Mm, So one is like fear of looking bad. That's probably the biggest one that leaders and high achievers have. You don't want to look bad. You don't want to look stupid. So how is that stopping you from truly getting clear? How is that stopping you from saying, I don't know? Or, well, what do you think? And not having to know it all.
Well,
Another,
oh,
yes.
before you go on, let me just comment on
Yeah.
that one. So I think there's two parts there, and I'm afraid I might sneeze. So I'll say that in advance. Um, Not only does the fear of looking bad keep us from the things that you described, it also keeps us from learning. Like, because if we don't try something new, right, or if we just assume what we're doing is okay, then we're never going to learn anything either. So on top of all of the clarity piece that you're talking about, right? So what's the second one?
Well, and why I'm mentioning these and asking you to think about them for yourself is because also recognize that others have these. So if I were communicating too, I was wanting to be clear to someone who doesn't want to look bad, I might express something differently than someone who perhaps has a fear of confrontation. It's just, take some time to learn who you are wanting your message to land with. Another one is fear of being blamed. And how this shows up is it keeps people from wanting from looking positively at any change, because you're talking about a better future and all they can think of is that, oh, they're saying that what I've done in the past is bad, is wrong, I'm wrong. When you're not saying that what was done in the past didn't serve you then or didn't serve everybody then. You're just saying it's not going to serve us in the future, and so let's change. And to you, it's like obvious. Why is that a problem? And then this person you're wanting to communicate with is just so full of this fear of being blamed that you can't communicate properly. So be aware of that and and understand how to communicate in that way, to just talk about how what was done was served you then.
Right. Two things about that. Number one is that um, even if you're not trying to blame them, they may hear it that way. And it might not have anything to do with how you said it. Doesn't change it, right? Communication until they get what you actually meant doesn't matter. So the reason that they may feel blamed may have nothing to do with your the way you said it, but it might have everything to do with the way you said it. And we've got to be very clear. There's a difference between the behavior and the behavior, right? Like we can talk about what happened and keep that separate from who the person is. And that's a critical opportunity for us to get more clear.
Oh, you're so right, Kevin. When I work with leaders, it's not uncommon at all that I'm working with this just most real caring leader. And they'll say to me, why can't I get from others, what you can or what we can in a room together. And I just tell them that when you are the boss, even though you are an absolutely caring leader, your words are going to come to them in a certain way, no matter what. And so you just need to understand that when you're communicating.
It's true. Wally says it's so hard to see a vision of the future when you're too busy looking for cover. I love that. Wally, that earns you a book. Wally's getting a copy of Pivot to Clarity. So, Wally, what you've got to do is send an email to info@virtualleadercon.com and give us your mailing address. And if you send an email and say, I won the book, but don't say your mailing address, Laura's going to say, but I need your mailing address. So, because we can't, this is not going to be digital. All of you can get chapter 7, but Wally is going to get the whole book. Somebody else is too before we're done, but Wally gets
And the other thing I'll say about that book, it is about clarity. So it is a succinct book. My first book, which is twice the size, is concise. It has everything it needs. This one is succinct. It's your airplane read as you head off to Cabo.
And everybody, guess where I read it? On an airplane. So there you go. Jacqueline says even more complicated in a cross-cultural environment. So, and I would say
Yes.
even more complicated in a hybrid or virtual team or long distance team environment. Do you want to comment on any or all of that, Lori?
Yeah, I've thank you for asking that. I've run into that as well. And one thing that is where the communication doesn't click in both of those cases is agreement. What is agreement? What are the signals that you get when someone agrees and they understand, when in fact they've misunderstood? And you don't know until then you don't get what you expected. Or you think they've agreed because of how they've signaled it as the way that you recognize agreement, and they had no intention of agreeing. And both of those happen. So the onus is on you.
Just because they said yes, boss, doesn't necessarily mean, right?
So the onus is on you to communicate often. It's not just a one. Oh, check mark, done, all good. No, it is. Sometimes when I work with leaders who are moving from, so they're managers, maybe they're moving into a position where everybody's managers, even when you're a leader, but they're trying to gain more leadership, but they feel like they have nothing to do as a leader, and so they're not willing to step into that role. That shield of being an expert is so comfortable, right? I've been there. I get that. And
Yep.
these things that I'm saying are what you do as a leader, and they do take time. It's just that you need to take the time to do them. And if you don't want to do them, then don't be in that role. Do us all a favor.
Well, exactly. And and here's one of the reasons people end up feeling they need to be in that role, because society has said, or their parents have said, like, I've got to get promoted to prove that I'm getting better. And maybe they really want to be that subject matter expert, right? That technical expertise. And
Mhm.
so, if you're leading people who are struggling with that, really help them understand that there's more to it than just, oh, that's the only way I can progress. That's the only way I can feel like I've been successful, et cetera. Robin asked a great question. She said, Lori, how do I create clarity without constantly over explaining or over analyzing everything?
So what does over explaining mean to you?
We're gonna go to we're gonna let Robin give us a chance to answer. It's a great question. So
Yep.
Lori, we're gonna go on to something else, and
Okay.
Robin is gonna say, what does that mean? Is gonna answer that question, and then we're gonna come back to Robin. Okay.
Okay.
So another question, if I can scroll down here. How can I help my supervisor with clarity? In other words, how can I more effectively manage up?
Aha. Oh, what a great question. Managing up is is not easy, and bravo to you for being aware that that is something that you want to do. Um, one, you can ask questions. Two, you can ask permission to give feedback. Three, you can give your best shot. And again, each of these, choose one of these based on what you perceive of your supervisor. You can give something your best shot, but don't take the entire time. Just do it really quick, a quick iteration, and then take it to them. So now you've produced something, and take it to them and say, "Is this what you meant?" Nah, that's not what I meant. You know, why are you bringing me this? Blah blah blah. I don't know how they are, and you'll say, I'm working to help myself understand what you want, and can you help me? And you know what? I I certainly would hope that they would be in a position the minute you've delivered something, you've done your best, and then you've asked them to help you understand, that they will take the time to help you understand. And we'll learn from that because now you've spent some time. You've been clear about what their initial communication brought out of you.
Perfect. There you go. So Robin answered the question. Over explaining to her means I live in fear that I'm not understood, so I say too much.
Ah, okay. That's a different types of explanations. First, um, look at the timing of when you're explaining. So one thing I focus on in the book, and also I kept trying to do in the book because it's something really important, and that is get to the point. So the explanations come after you've made the point. And so if you're feeling that the person is getting glossy-eyed or getting nervous because they've assumed that you're going to say something bad, or you've lost them because they feel that they know what you're going to say, that probably indicates that you're explaining before you've gotten to the point. If you get to the point up front, then you can maybe explain a little bit or maybe not, ask them if they understand, and then explain a little more, and then ask them if last thing on that is that different cultures have different ways of being okay with how you ask if they've understood. And unfortunately, you just gotta have some hiccups to before you understand what works for them. So you could say, "Do you understand?" and go, "I just want to know if I'm making sense to you," or whatever. And do this in a way that they can give you feedback of what words make sense for them.
That clarity really matters. So Keith wants both of our input on this question. He said, how much does personality type, whether you want to think about DISC or Myers-Briggs or whatever, how much does that play into the reasons we might have problems with clarity?
Um, what are you? What
What am
disc?
I?
No,
I am
what
one of, the world
Myers-Briggs?
does not want two of Kevin. We know that much.
What
Uh,
Myers-Briggs are you?
what is my Myers-Briggs? ENFP or J, depending on the day.
Okay, and the person who asked the question, what Myers-Briggs?
He is ENFP.
Okay, and I am an ENTJ. So I like to get to the point, and yet, we're not all, we're not all bucketed, right? So I have a bit of a P. I'm a creative, so I get that. I also, I don't know, females tend to over-explain and trying to be understood. I have a fear of being misunderstood. Might cause me to, so people are multidimensional. Oh, yes, how their personalities are plays into being clear. If I am speaking with so NT in the middle means intuitive, we tend to create out loud, which can drive an ST, someone who is like the engineer mind, very logical order, drive them mad. So all I will do at the beginning of the conversation is say, it's going to sound like I'm going in circles, but I'm promise I'm going to bring this all together at the end. And you can almost visibly see them relax because they're not having to immediately try to figure out what I'm saying.
So I'll answer the question by tagging on to what Lori just said, and that is whether you see a link to our disc assessment was put in the chat. Is that it's important to understand our style. It's at least as much or more important to understand the communication style of the other person, because what we need to do and what Lori just described is doing what they need, getting clarity by focusing on the audience, not on our personal preferences or natural first responses. So my answer, Keith, would be recognize that we do have different styles and work to communicate with clarity in a way that works better for the other person. And Lori described an example of that just there. I'm looking at the clock. There's questions I want to ask, but at the end of the day, who matters more? The group matters more. So the question that's come up, and people are agreeing with it. What if you aren't given time and space to get clarity? If the culture is go, 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 and you're feeling that we're not actually ever quite getting to clarity, what's your advice?
Oh yeah, I hear you. I was in a billion-dollar startup basically, meaning I was with Tosco Marketing. So Tosco was an oil business and they were not in retail at all. And they purchased all these retail, they purchased all the assets from BP and then they kept buying stuff and they brought in a team and I was one of the managers and it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. It was 80-hour weeks. I had a 2-year-old. They're thinking we're just going to be as happy as can be with, ooh, they're bringing lunch in and ooh, they're bringing dinner in. It was just, I do tend to be a workaholic, but no, it was not okay. And it lasted for a really long time. Uh, and and you don't have time and you are looked at, even if you're a manager, you really don't have time to lead. You don't have time to think other than figuring something out. You're always fixing problems. And what it took for me is one, the moments you can make the moments smaller. Does this feel right for me? You can usually fit in a walk, right? Maybe it's during the day, maybe it's after work to just and you don't even have to think, oh, now I have to now think of this great vision. Just use the time to get in touch with what feels right for you. Is this right? Because one of the things I also talk about in the book Clarity is if it's not a yes exclamation point, that kind of thing that gives you chills up and down your arms, then it is a no. And you need to understand yourself well enough to to give yourself the gift of that yes every once in a while. I don't know. I hope I answered your question somewhat.
I have one more question for you, Lori, and the poll is probably going to come up here shortly. So everybody, please make sure you answer the two very clear, I hope, poll questions. Here's the last question, Lori. This whole event is about leadership, but this whole event is about learning. So my question for you is this: what's one thing that you, Lori, have learned about learning?
My favorite thing that I've learned about learning is unlearning. Yay! So I have had to unlearn so many things about myself. When I moved from corporate to being an entrepreneur back in early 2001, when I moved from being wanting to be a better leader and moving from being a consultant to also being a coach and having to unlearn being the smartest person in the room to answer all the questions and fix everything. Unlearning is oftentimes your best next step to then learn new ways. Open up the space in you, get rid of something to put something better in.